Manheim, it's, first time meeting with you. I will just say thank you for joining our Thank You Science podcast. Of course, I know you from, I'm 45 years old. I remember the days of Venom and Bathory and Mayhem coming out. I was big into listening to that stuff. But you talk to people for decades now about your music career, and I don't want to get too deep into that. But what I am interested in is, as someone who's been to Norway and interacted with the society over there, and I know you've been over to the U.S. before. What is it that's what's different about the education system?
Well, yeah, I guess it's different in different parts of the U.S. So maybe that's the way somewhere to start. I guess in Norway, everyone has the same education system to go to. It's not this tradition that you can see in England and maybe also in the US where you have a lot of private schools.
Yep.
So everyone is going to the public schools, and we spend quite a lot of money on them. So the basics is really that you start when you're 6, and you have the right to, an obligation and the right for the first 10 years to go to school. Then you have the right for 3 more years. You can actually spend four years to spend those 3, to finish those 3, I mean. So actually we have 13 years paid education, which you have the right to have. I don't think it's very different than other parts in the Western world, at least. It's probably different in the way that the different subjects are being taught.
Mm.
But I think the main difference is that it's free for everyone, and it's even an obligation for parents to make sure that their kids go to school. So that's one part. Then of course the biggest difference, and here we are different than many other countries in Europe as well. But it's the same in the Scandinavian countries, and that's the higher education is also free.
Okay.
So that of course make it easy for people, regardless of their background, to follow their interests and of course what they are capable of. So if you come from a poor family, you can easily become a lawyer if you have the skills, right? So I think it's kind of a democratic system. That's where we differ a lot, I think, compared to the US, for instance, but also other countries like the UK.
Yeah, I think the UK has really been taking a lot of cues from the U.S. in the last 20 years, for better or worse. So my wife, her family is actually British. My wife's actually in the UK right now, visiting her mother, and they're starting to privatize much more over there at this point. So, but do you? I'm sure you guys. I shouldn't say I'm sure, but I would assume you guys don't have the same thing. Like, there is a battle over here because, for instance, the state of Texas is one of the biggest school systems in the United States, and there was a battle over here not that long ago, just a few years ago, over school textbooks. So, since our school textbooks are being produced privately and then sold to the school system, there is a battle over, for instance, on the science front, whether evolution should be taught as a fact or as a theory.
Yeah.
Because, the textbook makers don't want to produce different textbooks for every state. So they go to the biggest markets and they let them kind of drive what the content will be. And I'm guessing you guys manage that piece a little bit better, or maybe a little bit more sanely would be the word to say.
Yeah, I hope so. I certainly hope so. But the pressure from the religious people to bring creationism alongside with evolution theory is present here as well. It's not prominent like you can see in the US, but certainly are people who try to do that. We actually had a minister in the 80s, beginning to be some years ago now, but it's, if you look at it in a historical perspective, it's not that far back in time, where he was from the Christian Party. We have a Christian Party here in Norway, and he was educational minister, and he tried to actually do that, to put creationism into the teachings. He didn't succeed though, but that, I think that's what the problem is, that the religious people will always try, and they don't give up. So we need to be alert. And that was actually what happened back then. There was some journalists actually who actually read the paper that he had produced, the bill, if you will. We don't call it a bill here in Norway, but I guess that's what people will understand what this is. But he was about to make that a law. Now we're 30 years up future from there, so there's no discussion of bringing creationism into the schools. On the contrary, but science is of course under pressure here as well, because you have the internet and you have people tend to bring in their sources from all over the place, and of course US is still the culture side is very influential culture, going through media like films, TV series, music, and even news, etc. So people tend to go for what they recognize, and there's a lot of Christian people here in Norway who wants to break the system. But right now, we actually is the private. It's the school books are being produced by private labels, but they are being dictated, or no, not dictated. What's the word? We have a government committee or an institution actually who acknowledge different learning books and decide what learning books are going to be allowed for the public schools.
Sure.
And then each school can choose from the list that they accept. So we have a bit of control, and I think we should have that control. I'm not that into state control really, but some things should be run by a government, and I think education is one of them.
Certain things that are best left to a sort of democratic state, as it were.
Yeah, well, I'm Richard Dawkins. I'm sure you know him.
Yeah.
He had a talk about reason and experts, and he did go on some videos that's available on YouTube, I think, where he explains what he means by elite systems. He says that he's not an elitist, because it doesn't mean that just a certain people like feudalism should run the world. He's all for democracy, but he wants people who knows what they're talking about to run certain things. Like when he want to fly, he wants an expert on plane flight to actually run the plane. But he wants a democratic system to regulate the airspace, right? And what the pilot is allowed to do, and the quality of his equipment and plane. And I think that's what a lot of discussion is all about right now. You have Trump. Let's not go down that path. But we have the UK have Brexit, of course, is horrible. Yeah. We also have movements in Norway who start to disregard science and knowledge, and who try to, for instance, say that the vaccines are dangerous, and it should be up to each parent to decide. And the funny thing is that in Norway it is a voluntary thing to vaccine your children. But then again, we have like a population of 95% who are under the vaccine program. So it's not the last 5% is okay. But if that 5% gets to 15% or 20%, then the vaccine program doesn't work, right? So,
yeah. So over here we call it, this anti-vaxxing movement is actually the name of it. And it gets framed odd, so the people that are against vaccinations, they say I should have the right to decide, whether my kid is vaccinated or not. But I think what we lose is, by giving them that right, we're actually giving them the right to decide who actually gets hit with these diseases as well. These are folks that could spread a disease that has not affected a population for 100 years. I think that you are absolutely in your right to have that belief. But we've got a shared society, and in a shared society, you've also got to take into account the people around you.
Yeah, I think the basic problem is actually that people tend to distrust a lot of information that they get. We thought that with the internet everything would get better. It's actually gotten worse because people who are skeptic in the first place gets even more skeptic if you try to guide them through all the information that's out there. If you look at the vaccines, for instance, I think that if everyone actually read and trusted the science around it, we wouldn't have the anti-vaccine activists at all, because they would reason. I don't think they're evil. They would reason around it, but it's because it's so easy to plant disinformation, and in this case, it's even we know the source, right? It was this fake project that this English writer, I'm trying to remember his name, but he was even convicted, right? I think it also got jail time for it because he was paid to come out with some information that wasn't true. And he has later come out and he has also confirmed that he didn't do the science properly, and his results were just bogus, right? But yeah. even though it's out there, people still, don't trust it. And I think that's probably one of the big problems we have. But I think it's interesting though, because I spent my whole life arguing against religion. What I've been arguing against is not people's beliefs as such, because I'm a true believer of freedoms of thought, freedom of speech and everything. But it's the organized religion I'm scared about, right? Because people tend to go into bubbles of belief that have catastrophic results. They impose rules based on belief instead of based on facts, and I think that's religion. But we see that now on all kinds of things in society today. People, even membership in the EU, right? People were actually arguing in TV shows and debates that it should, well, they debated if you should believe an expert or not. And that's pretty absurd. And it's not people they stopped on the street. It was actually politicians that discussed it. People of different kind of trades discussed it. So it was actually a serious debate in England.
Everybody says I want to have as many choices as possible, but you can actually overwhelm people, and they almost get to a point where they can't make a choice because there's so many choices out there. And I think that the internet has allowed us to pick and choose sources and create bubbles, and in a way it's given us the ability to block out what we don't want to hear. And that's again, I think in a shared society, which we all are, regardless of whether it's a communist, socialist, capitalist, whatever society we're in, you're in a society where you interact with other people. And if you don't have some basic foundation of of knowledge to use as a jumping off point, then I think things can get really messy really quickly.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, and I think we have a lot of proof of it around the world. And the great deceiver has always been religion, but now we have different. Well, it comes from other parts of society now. It's not all only the big religions who are putting ideas into people's head. There are people who runs a YouTube channel who can easily make a lot of people believe stuff that's absolutely, you wouldn't believe it if you read a book. But there's unfortunately a lot of people don't read books, right? So they don't have the information to make the difference between dirt and gold, right? So, and we can see that the dictators around the world and the religious leaders around the world and other mind leaders have always known this. Because what they always attack first is media and education. That's where they start. You can see it in Turkey now. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the situation in Turkey, but it's horrible. And now they've taken out the evolution theory completely from their learning books. And when confronted with it, the Minister of Education in Turkey just said that, he was confronted with how is the Turkish children and youth, where are they going to get their information about evolution? And his answer was just Google it. So he wasn't even interested in defending himself. He was just efficiently removing it. And in short term, no worries at all, because Turkish people are pretty, they are educated. Yeah. But in 15, 20 years, you have a whole generation that doesn't, that will question science on that. For the minister, I guess, it's not that he wants people to be stupid. He just wants them to believe in his religion. I think that's the main objective for the government and Erdogan in Turkey. So they use information and education as a tool, and that's what they always do.
Over here, anyway, we use trivia to divide people, and it's for votes. And in the U.S., from my experience, the religious aspects are still there, but we've got a very corporate-run society as a heavily capitalist society. I don't know if you'd heard of it, but there is, maybe 10 years ago, there's a giant financial group called Citigroup here, and they put out a memo to some of their top investors, which basically said the U.S. is no longer a democracy. It's a plutonomy now. And you get into this point. It's funny. I think that you are the fourth or fifth interview that we've done, and every single interview, this has come up regardless of what we've talked about, whether it's chemistry, or we talked with Nick Yaris about prison, or we're talking with a magician yesterday. And being able to trust the presenter, so trust the source, has come up in every conversation. And it gets very difficult to figure out which sources to trust when there's literally millions of sources to go to now.
Absolutely. And it's a huge problem that we are in the middle of. There's a lot of things on the internet with the internet, there's a lot of things on the internet as well, but with the internet, we have a lot of things that are unanswered. We don't know how to handle everything yet. You can see that there are different approaches. If you don't look at states like Iran and Russia and things like that, but you look at the big countries like India, the biggest democracy in the world. You have the US, you have the EU. You even got China. We can of course criticize China, but China is kind of an anomaly in the world right now, but it's a big one. So we need to look at how they run it. They all try now to find a way to understand and regulate, but they don't want to. Well, if you look at how the EU is running things, they are trying to I think they're trying to break land for a free space, because there's no such thing as a free space on the internet. right? There's free space in the real world. You can go out on the field and you can say whatever you want. You can gather around a group of people and no one will track you or listen into you or whatever. But there's no such place on the internet, right? What we need to do is to actually take back the space, try to find out how are we going to let culture, let free speech, let knowledge and science to be spread and used and discussed freely on the internet without corporations going in and have interests, or without the government going in and surveilling everything on micro level. I'm all for a society that actually knows what's going on, but I'm all against a society that controls each individual, especially when it comes to the free culture and free speech.
And I think the internet does give the opportunity. I don't know if you've heard of, there's a website out there called Sci-Hub. We just learned of this a couple weeks ago, and it's a Kazakhstan woman, a student, Alexandra Elpagayan. I'm terrible with the name, but she's actually gone and started to collect all of these peer-reviewed scientific journals and post them for free. These are journals that maybe they're $10, $30, maybe they cost $100 or $1,000, but the prices have been going up forever. And these are documents that were produced with tax dollars that are now being sold in the research community or the scientific community. And so she's gone over and found, I'm just looking up right now, is she's got 64.5 million academic papers and article on her website right now for direct download. The problem is, of course, that so far as some of the state players are concerned, she is now a criminal. So this is something that really should be good for society. So far as they see it, she's stealing from them, whether these were produced with tax dollars or not, and they want to try and shut it down. But yeah, it's the Sci-Hub project, and it's actually pretty interesting.
I'll check it out. But I totally agree. There's a lot of people now, a lot of places where you get public information, which but that's not what I talk about. I'm talking about a place where, well, you can go to the Sci-Hub, and there's a lot of people who will follow you to the Sci-Hub, and everything from Amazon and Google and Microsoft and all the big ones, and governments and other people, and you leave tracks, and everything you say and do are being followed, right?
Sure. Yep.
So what I'm talking about is free space, and of course you have Tor and you have other VPN structures to limit. But the most important one is the HTTPS, right? Where it's encrypted. But encryption on that level is not enough. I think we need to go into this space with more than technology. I think we need to go in this with legislation. Like the EU is now forcing everyone. I'm not sure if you know this, but they have come up with this new law that will come into effect in May this year, where I don't remember the long name for it, but the short one is GDPR, and it's all about protection of privacy. So if a company wants to do business in the EU on the internet, they need to follow certain rules on how to store data, how to make it available for the people that it concerns, and even giving me as a citizen the right to delete every data. And there's also quite heavy routine demands on who has access and how to handle it. They also means this time it's for real. They also say that if you don't follow these, you get the 4% fine of your revenue, and you can't hide behind a daughter company. The fine will follow all the way to Bermuda. So they have actually put aside the limitation that you have in a company and say that we follow the owners. So you can imagine if Alphabet are fined with 4% of their revenue, it's a big fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this time it's for real. So I think there's a lot of good things going on in the EU here. And I think there's a lot of good things going on in the US also, but it's more activism, I think, in the US. But you are protected. You're fortunate to have a very, very good foundation that you can use in all aspects with the Constitution, I mean. So the Constitution you have is much better than the Norwegian. And so I wish we had the same tool.
Yeah. Well, I think it's, you touched on it, but when you mentioned safe space, my point, I think, was more that the tool is there, but to your point, the kind of overarching watching that is happening, there is Tor and there's ways to encrypt data and things of that nature, but it's not a safe space if you have to be in hiding to use it, right?
Exactly. And to the other part, the thing that to make things available for the public, at least the things that are paid for by the public. There actually things are better in the US than in Norway. Because in Norway everything is protected and you have to pay for even map data you need to pay for here in Norway, even though you can get it for free from Google. It's
wow.
Yeah, so the public information is not available for the public as such. You need to pay to get the information. It's available, but you need to pay to get it.
That's not something I'd have expected. Well, when I was a kid in Boston, Massachusetts, we were able to go to museums and other kind of cultural activities, and they were either free or they were cheap, at least affordable, if not cheap. But these days now over here, I liked being in Oslo because you could walk down the street and around the corner and walk into a museum or a sculpture park. And in the U.S. now, basically, if somebody's building something or curating something, you're paying every time you want to go see it. So
yeah, I think that's a virus in the political system, that everything should be either earning money or covering its own cost. I think it's diversion from what's important. What we do have here in Norway and probably in most of Europe, but that differ us from the United States, is the willingness to pay taxes.
Yep.
That willingness is going to sustain. We need to have a public service that people understand. So the more payment you put on public service, the less people will actually accept the tax level. And I think culture is very important. I think all cultural, like museums or at least museums and parks and stuff like that should be available for everyone for free. But unfortunately, it's not. And I think that's not good. I also think that the public should spend money on cultural activities like concerts and stuff like that. And it's not because I'm a musician, so I would benefit from it. It's just that I think it's important to have that kind of culture. And we can see how we substitute literature, we substitute a lot of cultural things. So I think it should go even further, because it's all about sharing information and bringing together people in a common understanding. So I think these things are important. But for some reason, there's a lot of people that think that everything everything should be run by the spreadsheet, right? It looks good in the spreadsheet, and that's how it's going to be. And I'm not a believer in the spreadsheet, not in the public service at least.
Yeah, one of the things you and I messaged about, which I don't know if we'll chat music at all, but what we're talking about, but the antithesis of, I don't know if I want to use the word antithesis, might be too strong, but I will, but the antithesis of, say, high culture, right, or cultural art would be something that you mentioned, which would be the internet meme generation, right? And for you, so we all see this, and it's about going viral and how many clicks can you get, how many views, how many shares. For better or worse, you being at the beginning of the entire black metal movement, you've likely seen more than your share of memes forwarded on to you with guys in face paint and everything else. So it's industrialized food, right? Compared with organic food almost when it comes to art.
No, what you described there is actually more of a meta thing in the world right now, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's affecting everything. It's not only the way that memes are being made, it's also about how news are running, how fast we are consuming all kinds of information, how little patience we have, and you sound like old men when they talk about this, right?
Yeah.
All the better before, but I'm trying not to do that. I like the internet. I'm an internet enthusiast. I like the future, how it's unfolding regarding making the world a smaller place. But the problem right now is that everything is, as you say, so focused on making money on clicks and immediate gratifications. But I think we have, well, I read a lot of articles, I'm not going to mention one of them, but I read a lot of articles lately that actually blame the business model on the internet for the development. I think they're partly right, because the business model being advertisement, right?
Yeah.
So of course, everything is focusing on making you and I and everyone else to consume as many page views as possible. That's the basic plan. And below the surface, you have this harnessing of user data, which is not about page views, but is all about getting your attention. And that's the two currencies on the internet at the moment. And I think it's, as long as that is the only currencies we have with value that corporations and governments are building their solutions on, then we will have a problem. Like you say, things will be consumed mega fast. We will have fake news that travel faster than anything. We will have difficulty distinguishing what's good data and what's bad data. It makes it possible for Russia to have 50,000 Twitter accounts that spread, garbage around the world. That's just where we are right now. We need to fix this.
Yeah.
I don't have all the answers, but we need to fix this.
I'm kind of with you. I do my best not to be the old fogey, as it were, and the get off my lawn guy. I meet a lot of very smart, very activist young kids who I do believe will do good work, and the generations coming up will figure this out. But it's really hard to wrap my mind around how you actually make, real change in a system that is just kind of hell-bent on pushing forward with the way it's always worked.
Yeah, well, when I grew up, everyone said that consumerism was a kind of religion. It took me some years to understand the concept of that. But at my age now, with my experience, I think I agree, because religion is a belief system, a value system, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if the values is all about consumption, what you regard as a good life and what gives you status and what have you, is all about how much you can consume. I'm not talking about luxury goods necessarily. It could be the barbecue, right? It could be everyday things. It could be experiences. The more experiences you get, the more happy you get. You need to feed the beast, right? You can't stop. because everything is all about new stuff, and I'm guilty as well. You know, I consume a lot of stuff all the time, but I can easily see that I'm a part of the problem as well. What we need to do is to find out how to cope with everything, and try to slow things down a bit, to actually be content with less, if you know what I mean. And I'm not talking about going back to the 50s or the 40s or the 1800s or whatever. I'm talking about, just being a bit more conscious about what and why we need stuff.
Yeah.
Right? And it's difficult because it's the social pressure. I have kids that are now in their youth. They're soon going to be on their own in the world, and of course, I can see how they are. They grow up with the internet, of course, in the generals, but they basically are a Snapchat generation. It's all about instant and constantly giving each other feedback. And it's all about, like Kurt Cobain had this lyrics once, here we are now, entertain us.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure what he thought when he wrote those sentences, but he has surely put it right. It's more true now than ever. I don't have the answers. It's in some aspect it could be scary to look into this. And are you familiar with this British TV series, Black Mirror?
Oh yeah. Yep.
Yeah. So they are going into this dysfunctional end of everything. I'm not sure if they're correct, but I think it's interesting to see how they pan things out. But I think that internet is so young. It's only been around, us consumers for like 25 years or something. And in the if you look at it historically, we need at least 50 years more before we start to understand things. But of course, the pessimists say that then everything has developed in the speed that makes everything different as we go. But I think that will be the new normal, and we'll find things out. But the problem is that people get, as you said earlier, that people get so much information, it's difficult to choose what to believe and what to not believe, or what to consume and what to not consume, and how to deal with that. We haven't seen that yet. You can see that Facebook is trying, but I don't think they will succeed. I think Facebook needs a regulator to tell them what to do. And that's probably the case with Microsoft and Amazon and Apple and Google as well. I think someone needs to go into that. I read an article actually where they said that we are now into feudalism in the internet, where there's just a few persons, actually 5-6 men, that owns most of the companies that run the whole internet, and that's true. It's scary. Yeah.
Well, that's education and science. It's now driven by markets, and I think one of the things that would be helpful is every ecosystem, whether it's humans or other animals or even bacteria, there's a risk-reward scenario that plays out. You have to take risks to get specific rewards, and if the reward is worth it, you'll take the risk more and more. And what we seem to have stepped away from is really focusing on the outcomes, the desirable outcomes we want. And in the 80s and 90s, when Japan was booming, there was a sort of cliched phrase that would get thrown around in business, and they'd say, Japan is doing so great because they're looking 10 years down the road, and in America, we're just looking into the next quarter because of the stock market. I think that Japan has fallen into the same trap that we're in at this point, but
absolutely.
But I do believe that, by focusing on specific outcomes that we want to achieve, we can actually set up systems to allow for specific rewards and push, I hate the word push, but, to really kind of enable people to go down those paths to achieve the outcomes that would be most helpful or beneficial.
Yeah, but I think you said it yourself, right? It is the system. You said that now science is run, driven forward by enterprise.
Yeah.
we need the system to make it easy for everyone to participate. We can talk in a small scale. Let's talk about music and where music came from. Because everyone thinks that it's a natural thing that you should pay for music, right? Yeah. That's how it always has been. But that's not the case, right? It's a pretty new phenomenon that you pay for music, and the reason for that is, of course, that it's the packaging. To package music is difficult, and it hasn't been done until you got the records. The records were kind of an exclusive thing. And then you had a big evolution in the music industry in the 60s and the 70s, where you actually got the production of that in a big scale. But that was General Electric and others coming into the record business, right? Building up huge labels and starting to make this a product. And of course, made a lot of rock stars very rich. Some of them managed to be rich and some didn't. But it's a short period of time where you can see that you have this. So where did we come from? Music was something that you paid to listen to in concerts, right? It was something that was basically a free product. So we had what we nowadays call free culture. Free culture means that you can take a piece of music that I made and you can meddle with it and you can make your version of it, and then I can take your version of it, and so forth and so forth. So things are developing, right? You get these folk tones, right? Which no one knows where it comes from. But it is this culture that's being built. So the system has been broken the last 200 years around music and literature and storytelling by copyright and by doing this as a business. I don't know. I should be all for, right, that you get paid for all listening to my music.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, it's not that easy to say that, because I want people to listen to my music, and I want the music that I produce. I want to see more bands and more people making that kind of music, and I want to see things actually progress. But since everything is locked down, you have this situation there where the people behind the music or the book or what have you, any immaterial right labeled product, you have these limitations on everything. It's, in my opinion, it's a correct thing to question whether or not we are better off now as a society or not. And I think that right now the answer is that we're not better off. We are worse off, because what we see now is that what everyone is confronted with in the mass media and this fast moving information age we are running, it's run by corporation, it's marketing, it's clicks, it's everything we just talked about.
Yeah.
While the creativity is being, dwarfed with all that information. So what we thought in the beginning, that the internet would open up all kinds of creativity, it's actually done the opposite. And still the lawyers and the corporations are holding on to the idea that you can actually own and protect something. And there's been a lot of interesting stuff going on to try to attack this kind of system. And I think Creative Commons is a very good example where someone else actually going into that space and say, well, it doesn't have to be like this. We can change this. And Creative Commons is one way to do this. And maybe we should bring that kind of idea into other aspects in life. It's not about altruism. It's not that you give away everything you have, but it's nuances, right? It's not black or white. You need to have a more complex structure to understand and to share and to make available for people to actually exploit and be creative and societies.
When you industrialize something, it requires a bureaucracy to then manage it. And there's a lot of players along the line that are taking a piece as something moves. But at the same point, that's kind of the downside, right? So that's kind of the Black Mirror side. But on the other side, I've discovered just so much amazing music. I remember the old days in the 80s of trading cassettes out of the back of Kerrang magazine with guys in South America and finding out about other bands that way. And today I don't have to do that. Today I can go on to Bandcamp or YouTube or wherever and just find these amazing artists who are doing great work, and they've got these tools to really broaden their audience. Now, the downside is if they don't fit into whatever is hot at the time within a market, that they're probably not making any money doing it. But I really enjoy the fact that I can find these people where 20, 30 years ago I'd never come across them.
Absolutely. And it's I totally agree. The problem though is that you mentioned Bandcamp. I think it's a wonderful service. YouTube is a wonderful service. Facebook, wonderful service. The problem with those is that they have their business model.
Sure.
So if you put your content on their platform, it's not as much Bandcamp, but if you take at least Facebook and YouTube, which are very important marketing tools at the moment. But I think that will change, but it doesn't matter what you call the service that are popular at the moment. But the point is that you are dependent on the model they set for distributing and making your content available. So I think one of the things, the best ways to see how this actually worked, to see like Mark Zuckerberg is not an altruist, is when he started his video service on Facebook. If you were trying to share anything from YouTube, it was being, hidden. It was kept safe on your page, and no one got to see the videos from other services than Facebook. If you put a Facebook video out, then everyone would see it, right? So as a creator, you have this problem that you can easily publish your stuff, but you have to publish it to the big ones. And we're talking about some oligarchy here. There's just a few big companies that control the market. And you actually, you don't have anything to say. And even though that you get, well, not even, but you get your stuff on YouTube. If YouTube decides that this content is not aligned with their criteria, they will deliberately bury it. And if it's crossing any of their red lines, they will delete it.
Sure.
So, and of course, it's in their right to do so. It's their service, but that makes it very difficult for people to actually get out their stuff. So I'm looking forward to see a future where you, as a content provider, where you have the content, get a more direct approach. And how we're going to do that, I don't know. You can always set up a blog, right? Or you can set up your own web server, but
yeah, and I don't want to be overly dramatic or negative. As I said, I do see a lot of good. I see the tools there. I think that, as we talked about a lot on this call, is the system can be corruptive or corrupting. If you look throughout just the history of humankind as we know it, right? There seems to only be kind of small spans of time where the people actually have real control, right? So eventually things separate and you get this large gap between the haves and the have-nots, and it kind of crumbles down, and then there's always some sort of a revolution or some sort of blowback, and things will kind of come back to where it's a little bit more equitable throughout society, and then we'll see that same pattern again, and we've seen this with societies failing and coming up and everything else, and again, for everything good that we see, there's something bad, and vice versa. I do. For me, it's heartening for me, as much as people complain about millennials and whoever's coming up behind them. I've actually found most of the kids I've interacted with to be, they see the world differently, which I think they should. And in general, they just seem to be smarter than when I was their age. For not everyone, but I hung out with a lot of stupid people, and I was a stupid kid myself. And I think that there's a little bit of hope there of somebody coming along, or a group of people coming along, who will take these tools and run with them and try to use them more toward the common good than toward the bottom line.
Absolutely. I share your optimism there. But I think to actually go in and find a solution, we need to accept the problem.
Yeah.
I think that, are we going to have a beneficial sharing of culture in the world? We need to have these bases, these structures that makes it safe and open and accessible for everyone. There's a lot of things that needs to come in place then. For instance, you have to have neutral internet. Now, US is the first country with your president now that tries to change that. But he's not the only one. We had an initiative on that already in 2000 in Norway, but it was held back. But there's a lot of interest in making the neutrality of internet something of the past, which I think, if that happens, it's a very, very troublesome situation. On the positive side, you can say that, okay, if it is like that we should accept this, then maybe it comes to the agenda for all the politicians around the world to actually create a public network.
Yep.
So it could, something that's really bad could be the tool, well, the ignition, you might say, to a political process that makes everything better. So who knows?
I am a perfect example of that, in that, I go to the doctor when something won't stop bleeding or I can't breathe. And so sometimes things have to get really bad before they can turn around and get good, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, but I agree with you. A lot of kids today are both bright and very well informed. I will say, though, that, and this might be just me and the people I meet, but it seems like they are less interested in society on a more philosophical level than we were when we grew up. But then again, we grew up with very recent history with the 70s and 60s and the war. I mean, we had all kinds of people around us telling us how things were and used to be, and how things were now after some struggle.
Yeah.
So,
and in certain societies, the kids haven't had to really see firsthand some of that suffering that some of the previous generations did. Not that I would wish that on anyone, but I would guarantee, for instance, that the young people in Iraq or Iran likely see the world differently than a Norwegian or an American kid. So.
Absolutely. And some bright people there will see that we need alternatives to stuff. But I am concerned to see democracies like Poland, Hungary, Turkey, United States, England. There are forces now that goes in a direction where we will have less focus on knowledge and science and more focus on belief systems and rules and regulations. So I think we need a change. Well, I hope that the new generation that's coming, my kids and they're alike, that they are able to turn that development into something different. Because right now it's kind of harsh to go into and see what people are doing, for instance, around science and free speech and free press, etc.
What the kids have today, every generation has it. You've got experience and the history of the people who came before you that you can leverage, but there is knowledge and experience that builds up over time, and the kids today have it. I mean, even just in the music scene, I've been amazed that there's a couple of gothic or gothic metal bands coming out of places like Turkey right now that have taken Fields of the Nephilim and Joy Division and all these older bands from 70s and 80s and are really taking that and pushing it forward. There's a great artist who I think was from Eastern Europe and now lives in the US called Zola Jesus. And it's really pop music, but I started hearing all of these influences underneath there and I couldn't quite place them. And, she's in her early 20s and I read an interview with her and she said, well, my father used to listen to Swans and Joy Division and all of these old bands. And so she's got all of those influences that she heard and has combined them with all the pop music that she listened to growing up as a young kid and is just creating this, to me, very aesthetically pleasing sound that really just couldn't have happened when you and I were kids because this stuff didn't exist at the time.
Mm.
And then, of course, the recording technology today. I mean, I remember paying $600 for a 4-track cassette recorder that by the time you finished a song, you had like bounced it and then recorded over the stuff. You stretched the tape so much it sounded like crap.
Yeah.
And today, if you got an iPad with GarageBand, I mean, you can produce almost studio quality stuff from your sofa.
Absolutely, and that's a good thing. I remember the biggest problem we had back in the days was the expenses of a studio.
Yep.
Because it was horrendous, the prices that we need. So what we did is, of course, to limit the hours in the studio as much as we could. So we could play our songs completely drunk with no error.
Yeah.
Because we had rehearsed so much. So
or at least you thought there was no error, right?
Yeah, we thought so.
The first album I recorded, we did 6 songs in 6 hours. That was recording and mixing and walking out with a finished cassette because that was all the money we had. So
yeah, and that's how it was, right? And
yeah.
So I think how things is being done now is it's incredible, and I really enjoy it. I also enjoy that young people today can just have, as you say, an iPad or whatever to just produce what they feel like right now. I also see it on synthesizers, like analog synthesizers that have been built now that are just amazing. I just wish that people recorded more than they built, so you could actually enjoy everything.
You'll probably hate to hear it, given your instrument of choice, but drummers are always hard to find and then keep around. So my music partner and I, our last album we put out, it's all digital drums.
That's how it is today. But that's actually a good thing for people like me who play without click and do everything the old way, because you can if you listen to program what's really difficult to program is the tiny differences, the small errors, the movement in the musical space. So because everything is clockwise in programming. So
yeah, well, we use a program called Addictive Drums. So we never got into the Mac ecosystem because when we started out, it was too expensive. So we used Windows and then Cakewalk, and then Cakewalk became Sonar, and I've recorded with that for years. And so we use Addictive Drums with that, and Addictive Drums literally has a setting now. So you build out your drums. We use loops. These are actual analog recorded drum beats and hits that they just chop up and then use them as loops. I've had friends of mine who are musicians say, oh, I couldn't tell that it was digital drums, but so you chop them up, but then you can actually humanize it. So it actually has an algorithm where it will go in, and this is kind of funny, it will remove the perfection. And it'll slide beats a millisecond this way or that way, and it'll change the volume here and there and stuff. it's cool. It's really helpful for us where we're two people. We don't want to deal with a full band, and it helps us to create and move on. It's a little bit scary, especially when you get into some of the AI stuff that's happening now and what these computers are going to be able to do in a very short time here. But I found it immensely interesting and satisfying to be alive. I think that you and I have seen a lot of change in technology, especially in the music and creation space over our lifetimes.
Absolutely, absolutely. I think it is. I think it's great that you can sit with all these tools, and it's not just drums; it's all kinds of instruments. I love it, and but then I also love to play live. So you need to be able to do it live.
But we tried. So Ken and Hillary came out. We actually did our first live show in about 12 years, just a couple weeks ago. So we have a whole board. We got one of these Hughes 16-track boards with a digital recorder in it, and what we're doing is bringing a laptop and trying to mix the analog with the digital in the back. And it was semi-successful.